We'll start off with George Pickens, who made headlines today with a very strange, rather strange interview at practice when asked about Russell Wilson saying that George did not run the correct route on his interception against the Kansas City Chiefs. That has become the biggest news of the week for some reason. It is not Russell Wilson having turnover issues. It is, did George Pickens run the correct route on a play that definitely would have been an interception either way? Mike Tomlin says no. Ben Roethlisberger says yes. Russell Wilson says yes. George Pickens said this.
George, it seemed like you and Russ weren't on the same page on that interception against the Chiefs. How does that happen, and what do you guys do to address it?
You said me and Russ wasn't on the same page?
Yeah, well, that's what he said.
That's what he said?
Yeah.
Or is that what you said?
That's what he said.
Okay.
How do you just address that?
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Classic George Pickens right there. Classic. I got to say, I'm loving that. Like, this is becoming a highlight reel of very strange moments in interviews with George Pickens, and we're going to be able to collect them at some point and just put a whole reel together. I'll say this. I got two trains of thought when it comes to this situation, as strange as it possibly is. The first one is I don't really care at this point about the George Pickens side of things. I'll say that George Pickens was not the reason that Russell Wilson threw an interception. He's also not the reason that Russell Wilson has struggled the last 3 games. He's not the reason that Russell Wilson fumbled the ball and then threw a pick 6 against the Baltimore Ravens. He is none of these things. That is not George Pickens. That is Russell Wilson. The reason that Mike Tomlin defended George Pickens on Monday when asked about the question is because, well, I believe he's getting sick and tired of his 36-year-old quarterback who they played and started to not turn the ball over, turning the ball over. And he's more upset about that than his 23-year-old wide receiver, who clearly is a superstar, but also has his issues at the same time, not running the right route. And that's the third part about this. I don't think George was lazy on that play. I just don't think he did the right thing. I don't think he ran the right route, because if you watch the play, George is looking for the football. He's engaged in the play. It's not as if he gave up. He just ran the wrong route. So, I mean, that part's on him, but it's almost a non-conversation. The way George answered it is more hilarious than it is anything else, but I got no issue with the George side of things. It's bad. It's a bad look. I don't have the highest of expectations on George Pickens and always doing the correct thing. It's a concern for the Pittsburgh Steelers that their best player offensively is not always doing the correct thing. But that's on Russ, man. And the whole conversation and everywhere it's gone from here is wild, because Russ is the problem on all of these turnovers. And somehow it's just becoming a George conversation.
Yeah, I view this the exact same way I viewed Mike Tomlin walking off the podium in Buffalo last year when asked about his contract. It's a funny clip, but it means absolutely nothing to me. And I understand that we have these conversations about George almost weekly. But in this instance, that game and that route specifically was over a week ago. They're 2 days away from a game against the Cincinnati Bengals team that is coming in to continue to keep the Steelers on the wrong trajectory. I don't care what happened last week. I don't care that he ran the route. I take out this entire play in general and say, I understand this is the first time that anybody's gotten to ask him about it, but I don't mind him simply sitting there saying, I'm not going to answer that question when you're asking me what I think about some guy calling me out 5 days ago. That's going to be something that he takes in, has that consideration, and I'm sure he brings it up to Russ at some point. I don't mind him not answering that for the media, and I understand there's questions to be asked and they have to ask those questions, but at the same time, I don't mind that George didn't answer this one.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious that he didn't answer. I think you should always answer a question, or you should politely say, I'm not going to answer it. Putting your thing up is hilarious and definitely, adds more drama than needs to be added to the situation. But I also agree with you. Like, this is a situation where the media, you have to ask that question. It has to be asked. But at the same time, it doesn't really need to be addressed. Like, at this point, it's more of you got to do your job without the expectation of there being anything on the other side of it. But that's the thing, is if you just say, I'm good, I don't want to answer it, there is no story to be had. we're not even talking about it right now. The way that he went about it was hilarious. Classic George Pickens at this point. And again, at the end of the day, it's on Russ, man. The interception was going to happen either way. Ask Justin Reed. It was going to happen because Russ threw a bad ball and it was lazy, and that's where we're at.